Well, hi guys, it's that time. It's our Bible Teaching Snippet of the day. Well, I'm in the airport and I'm trying to talk a little bit low, and I hope you can hear me. I'm getting ready to catch my flight. I'm headed over to Colorado to Woodland Park, and I'll be teaching just about every day that I'm there, and I come back home on Wednesday. So, yesterday I was talking about the Mosaic Law having 613 different laws to follow, and not just the tithe in it, but a lot of other things too that we just know that we aren't even under because we're Gentiles, number one, and number two, because Jesus redeemed us and set us free from the restrictions or the requirements of the law that Moses set in place. You know, what is a lot of misunderstanding about the Mosaic Law? It was given to the children of Israel, the 12 tribes of Israel, because that was God's chosen bloodline through Abraham. God made an agreement with Abraham in Genesis, a promise and a covenant. It's called the Abrahamic covenant. And he promised that he would work through Abraham's bloodline to bring the Messiah into the world. And along the way, the world had gotten so bad that God had to put some things into place to keep. And I love what Andrew Womack says. He says, you know, if God had not put the Mosaic Law in place, there wouldn't have been a virgin left in the earth to give birth to Jesus, to get him born here, because God chose a bloodline, Abraham, to get the Messiah born into, get a human man, a perfect human, sinless, into the earth so that he could redeem us and set us back in place to where we were in Genesis, as in the right position as sons of God, in the right condition as sinless. Where the fall of Adam brought us, we were all born into sin. Jesus lived and died and redeemed us from that. So God was trying to get his chosen bloodline people, working with them to get our Messiah, the one who would redeem all of mankind, born into the earth. That was the purpose of the Moses Law, partially, was to keep his people set apart so that he could get Jesus here. But anyway, what I want to go and talk to yesterday, I made a couple of comments about the Pharisees and that they had to tithe because they weren't from the Levite priesthood. They had put all these different rules and regulations in place that made people have to abide by them. And I want to talk a little bit about that today. I want to read you right here in Matthew chapter 23, verse 23, and it says, and Jesus is talking to the Pharisees. He says, "How terrible for you, woe to you, teachers of the law, you scribes, you Pharisees, you are hypocrites. You give to God 1/10 or pay a tithe on everything you have, now that's a key word. Let me just stop there and listen to what I'm going to say. You give to God 1/10 or pay a tithe on everything you have, even your mint, dill, and cumin. But you don't obey, you ignore, and you neglect the really important teachings, the weightier matters of the law. Justice, mercy, and being loyal and faithful. These are the things you should do, as well as not neglecting the other things." But here's what I want to show you here. Now, nobody really understands what Jesus is saying here. Did you know the Mosaic Law did not require people to tithe on mint, dill, and cumin, which are spices? The Mosaic Law did not require that. I'm going to read to you this. Right here, it says the law of Moses only obligated tithing on grain, wine, and oil. The religious scholars added, or if you want to call this, I'm reading this, the religious scholars, which would be the scribes and Pharisees, added the law to the law, their interpretation, which added the vegetables and herbs to their list of what should be tithed. So what Jesus was saying is, you are over here in your little spice garden taking all these and getting so specific about every little thing, 1/10 of every little thing that you have, but you're out there figuring out how to take women's homes from them. They don't have a husband anymore, they're widows. They have no way to protect themselves from vultures coming and taking advantage of them. And you holy men, you leaders of my people, you are figuring out ways of how to manipulate them to steal their homes out from under them, where they will be homeless, so you can take their homes and sell them and make money off of them. They were literally doing that to the widows. And that's why Jesus over and over was so angry with the Pharisees, is they had put a requirement for people to pay taxes in money to the temple, and the widows did not have any money and had no way of getting any. And that's why the widow's offering was only 2 little copper coins, which equals to less than even 1 penny. So let me keep going. I want to talk, but what I wanted you to see out of this is that yes, the Pharisees did tithe on top, a portion, their tenth, of what they were stealing from everybody, but they weren't leading the people the way that God had asked them to do. Now the next one I want to show you is Luke chapter 18 verse 12, and this is where the Pharisee is praying, and watch this. He says, I fast twice a week, and I give 1/10 on everything that I get and everything that I gain. Now I want to show you in this, Pharisees commonly fasted on Mondays and Thursdays. But did you know that that is not in the Mosaic Law either? Fasting was commanded by God by the children of Israel to be done 1 time a year, and that was on the Day of Atonement. In the Old Testament, God had his people fast for different reasons, called special fastings, but they weren't ordered to be done every year at a certain time or anything. So they did some special fasting, and you'll see in the book of Esther where Esther fasted for 3 days. But we do not see God commanding his people to fast except for 1 day a year, the Day of Atonement. And but we see here, again, I just wanted to show you a second verse here that shows that, yes, the Pharisees did tithe. But here's the thing. What you'll see is a lot of people who tithe are living in so much bondage that they don't really live out an effective life, and Christ is not alive and living in their lives and active. And one girl posted that some of the most angry people are people who tithe. And well, that's because they're under bondage and they're being forced to do something. It's not coming from their heart. It's coming from a different place of feeling a responsibility toward men, not toward God, but toward men. A lot of times we get put under that bondage, and that's why I'm teaching that the tithe should not be in the New Testament church system. It is not legal in the New Testament. Jesus set the Mosaic Law aside, and if he didn't, we need to get a list of all 613 laws and start following all of those, not just the 10%. And even if we follow the Mosaic Law of tithing, we need to start tithing food items. Again, if we grow a garden, we need to give the church 10% of that, or if we grow animals and we have more than 10 a year, then we need to give the church one of those 10 animals, okay? Because that's what the tithe was. It was never about money. Now, I want to go a little bit further today, and I want to tell you about something that I really hate to even talk about it, but I'm going to. So here we go. I was in classroom in one of the Bible colleges, and one of the instructors, and I want to stop here and say I fully and absolutely respect this instructor. I think he is an awesome teacher, but he was teaching all of us that when we go out and we start all these churches, which I didn't totally agree with opening and starting more and more churches. Look, guys, the ones we got's not working. Why would we just want to go in debt and build more churches that are more failures and hurting more people? I am a believer in small groups because people bond together as a family. They don't argue and fuss as much, but there's literally zero cost of running a home church, and you can give freely from your heart any amount you want, and then that money can be used to help the poor and the widows and people who are in need and not pay a bunch of bills. But anyway, this instructor was talking about how every year that you had to, when you preached, you had to, on the tithe, you would have to preach it 3 times a year minimum. And the 3 times that you always had to just put it on your calendar would be right after Halloween, because people start buying Christmas and will take the church tithe and buy gifts with it. And then after Christmas, when the credit card bills come in, you've got to hit the tithe one more time so they know that they can't take big sums and pay their credit cards off, but they have to keep paying their tithes with that money. And then the next time is when school is out, and that they should not be teaching. They should teach the tithe and get that brought in, and because people will take their tithe money to go on vacation and enjoy time with their family if you don't remind them how important it is for them to keep tithing to the church. And here's where the business side of me comes in. Now, let's just say that I think that we should have big churches and owe millions and millions of dollars, and that we have to have all this money to keep this system running. If I was a business person, business-minded as I am, the first thing I would do is figure out how that we do not need to depend on tithes during those 3 times of the year. I mean, that's how I run my restaurants. When I have a low season and I know sales aren't coming in as strong as normal, I pre-plan that. I either cut back in expenses or I save some money along the way so that when those bills come in during the slow times, I have money to pay my bills. I don't understand why we would sit and beat people over the head in the 1st of November, in January, and then again in May, telling them not to forget to pay the church what they owe them. Why don't we just tell people, look, you know what, this is a time that you're wanting to spend a little extra on your family, so don't worry about your tithe. You just take care of buying your children their gifts, take them on vacation. I would want people to keep their money in the summertime. If they were going to spend $1,500 to go spend time with the spouses together with their 2 or 3 children to take a nice vacation, I personally would rather people do that, because that's God's heart, is for family and for them to be together, as for me to beat them over the head and tell them that they have to remember to tithe to the church. And what is my point here? My point is, how far do we have to go to make people know they have to give us what they owe us, which is what we call the church tithe? There's something wrong with this system, guys. But anyway, it's time for me to go board on my airplane. I'm going to post this, and God bless you, and I'll see you right here tomorrow. Bye-bye.